Okay, we are now recording. Welcome to the March 17th iteration of the MicroProfile Live Hangout. The meeting minutes should be in the chat. If not, can someone please add a link to the meeting minutes in the chat? It is everyone's shared responsibility to take notes, so please take notes. If you're on this call, please add your name to the contributor section in the meeting minutes. And also the contents of the chat will be saved. So just a heads up on that, so everyone's aware. And I don't think I've really missed anything. So let's move on to our topics. MicroProfile 4.0. So what I did is I created a release tracking issue where we can just kind of go in and track which ones have been kind of completed, along with a link off to the milestone for each spec. I asked spec folks to actually link off to the milestone they preferred, so that's what's here. If this is not the right milestone link, just comment on the GitHub issue and I will fix it. Okay, I'm not sharing the screen. God, I knew I forgot something. You guys. Okay, where am I at here? Not desktop, where is it? God, do I really have that many windows open? I'm scrolling trying to find the right window to share. Here it is, Google Chrome. Okay, sorry about that. This is the page I'm sharing. It's linked in the meeting in the meeting minutes here. So I created this GitHub issue just to track which milestones are linked to this release. So if you participate in these various groups, spec committees, I guess, then please verify that I am pointing to the right one. And if not, just comment on the issue and I'll fix it.
You are showing your calendar, John.
Really?
Do you mean?
Yep. You are.
How many windows do I have open?
Yeah, you like
something to do with forums too.
You got St. Patrick's Day on there three times. You're really planning to party today, huh?
I am Scotch Irish, man. How many windows do I have open? Chrome windows do I have open, man? Really?
Is it your 30th anniversary of something today?
It is, actually.
Wedding anniversary?
Our first date.
Wow, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I didn't that. Okay.
That's so cute. Congratulations. We're recording, so for those new to this community, and not new, can you please state your name before saying anything? Let's just add this again.
This is David. Sorry, I'd like to motion that we make a resolution that John does something romantic with his wife to this. Do I have any seconds?
Yep.
Yeah, self-isolated.
+1.
Yeah.
Isolated.
You can drink wine and be super snuggly.
Okay.
So okay.
So I'm gonna try and share this again.
You've got to be 2 meters away from her.
Okay, how does this look?
That worked.
There you go.
Okay. All right. I'll have to go back and see the recording to see if there's anything compromising in my calendar besides that. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm not sure what happened there. All right. So that's the release tracking GitHub issue. So again, please just make sure I'm pointing off to the right milestone. Next, I'm not sure if we've actually finalized the open tracing, whether it's in or out of MicroProfile 4. Ken, you want to just do a brief review?
Yeah, so obviously open tracing as an open source project is now defunct and is being replaced by open telemetry. They don't have any, well, I shouldn't say that because I haven't looked. they're still in the early stages of getting things going. But I had a chat with Pavel last week, who leads the open tracing spec for MicroProfile. He said that by the end of March, so in the next week or two, Open Telemetry will have its first beta release. And they're still on track to have what they call a production grade release in the second half of 2020. And he felt that we could very quickly create a very basic open telemetry specification that basically covered what open tracing does today, but with open telemetry behind it in a very short space of time. And he felt that that was achievable to do for October's platform release. So it comes down to whether we're better off pulling open tracing from the platform for 4.0 to allow that to be added, or whether we have to wait until June.
The following June, right?
Yeah.
I kind of think once is open telemetry, this spec released, we follow the kind of the what we have set in practice, like context propagation and etc. And do we want to have some grace period, wait for some feedback and etc. I think with that, I would like to keep the open tracing in, and then give like a few months overlapping period, and then like directly replace. Or we could do another vote in the mailing list, so to see what other people think.
This is Heiko. I'm a bit worried with the open telemetry that if it's a spec that we just write down in 2 or 3 months, that it may be something that we need to revise a lot afterwards. So it should be probably added in incubation state or something, but not as a full replacement.
Yeah, agree. It's no point to rush. Oh, by the way, this is Emily. Sorry, I forgot to mention my name.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the name rule, but John here, open telemetry, what's it mean to have open telemetry and open tracing in the spec at the same time? Right, that means folks have to implement it both in an implementation.
As Ken here, if they were both in the same platform, implementations would need to be modified in such a way that only one was present within a given application. The two being present in the same would result in traces being recorded twice.
Okay.
And where would you put that requirement, Bill Shannon, by the way?
Which requirement?
That there must be only one in any given implementation.
Well, it would be by virtue of what specs we have in the platform as to how many would be there. I think John was asking from a perspective of could we have both in the platform at the same time?
I think
you said yes, you could have both, but any application has to have only one.
I think it has to be active only one. You can have both, but with config flag switch between them. I think that would be allowed.
Right, but where is that requirement that only one can be active in an application?
Well, it's from discussions with Pavel that the two implementations, if they were present, would cause conflict.
If I'm building an app, where do I read this requirement?
Well, it's not defined anywhere yet because we're figuring out whether we have one or both at the same time.
Yeah, this is just discussing.
If you were to decide to do this, where would you write down the requirement that there would only be one? Because there must only be one.
It would be in the specs of the open tracing and open telemetry.
So each one of them says, if you use me, you cannot use the other?
More than likely, yes.
Okay. There's no interest in having an actual platform spec.
So that's been discussed in the past, and we've built up, I think, a lot of incremental reasons to actually create a platform level spec. We've never actually executed on it as of yet.
Spec, don't we? I mean,
well, we do.
on
Let me rephrase that. All right. You know, the platform level spec says, here's the following specifications, right?
Yeah.
That are included, and that's really all it is today. But there's nothing in the platform spec that, for example, defines how specs have to interoperate at the platform level, right? And at the spec level, they do. And this is an example. And there were some other reasons that we talked about having a platform level spec. But this gets into the larger growing pains discussion. And Bill, that's a discussion that's kind of been a year plus in the making. This basically says, okay, we've got, 12, pretty soon 13 specs. You know, do we need to think about organizing the specs in some different way? Do we need to have a platform spec or not, right? It's an open-ended conversation. That whole conversation about platform specs and how to deal with the number of specs we have was put on kind of a pause when we decided, not we decided, but when Jakarta EE kind of hit the heavy lifting portion where we had to work a lot on the Java EE specs and people didn't have time to do both. But it's also kind of put on pause a little bit right now, I think, because of the working group discussion. So at some point, we do want to discuss whether or not to have a platform spec. And I hope I did that conversation justice there.
Yep, you did, John.
Yeah. So question for me is, right now we're at open tracing 1.1, and there doesn't seem to be any desire for anybody to implement 1.2 and beyond, or rather, I should say, so far it hasn't materialized. And if it's being deprecated and removed, it's really going to diminish the desire for it to be implemented, and that means that by the current requirements, we'll be stuck at 2.0 for quite a while. If we are going to eliminate it, well, if we're planning to sunset it, could we make it optional in some regard, at least in the 4 spec?
And if you're going to add this new requirement that you can't use the other one while you're using this one, you have to do a new revision of this spec anyways.
That would probably only be needed if they were both in the platform at once.
Right.
If open tracing's removed, it would be fine.
So what
Right.
Well, so the open question I had was like, what is are we recommending people, what are we recommending people to do? And, if you're in our situation, for example, where we haven't kept up with, like, we're up to date on most of the other specs. It's actually just that one and fault tolerance that are the ones behind. Other than that, we're in good shape. So, what do we think about, would we want us to make the investment to implement all the open tracing stuff and then immediately deprecate it and remove it, or what's the best strategy?
For the TCK and etc., they are still relevant. If you implement this open tracing spec and etc., I think it's by the time you come to do the open telemetry, save a lot of effort. There's 2 things, right? From a user point of view, before we have open telemetry is available, we need to keep on supporting the open tracing. So basically, it's a business as usual from an user point of view. And from an implementation point of view, if you want to certify against 4.0, I think is yeah, need to spend some time like to provide the open tracing aspect because it's needed. Because we don't know, I mean, when the open telemetry will be released. Also, there's a kind of projected time, and also I don't know how long it will take. Maybe sometime next year we get the support and etc. So, and then if the end user cannot use it, and then there will be a hole.
What is the actual status of the open tracing specification? You said it was removed or deprecated or closed or what?
Basically, anyone who was previously working on open tracing is now working on open telemetry.
Okay.
I think they just had like a patch release or something like that recently. And I could be wrong on this. And I mean, are there any plans to do any more updates to open tracing upstream, I guess, for lack of a better word?
This is Amelia. Should we ask that group, their opinions? Should we have that as via the forum, a few emails, and then just shoot that question directly and openly to the ones that used to be active in the project? Because we're speculating here. That is a waste of time.
Right.
Well, I wasn't speculating. I was providing information that Pavel, who led the spec, gave
I know.
me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that had already occurred. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah. So to answer John's question, recently, you are right. Recently, not recently, like in the past few months, they had the open tracing release. However, it's kind of it contains some break change. So that's why the open tracing want to release kind of major release to consume the open tracing the open tracing release. MicroProfile open tracing want to do a major release to consume the open tracing release.
Right. Right, and that was to provide that shim to allow an easier migration to the open telemetry.
Yes.
I mean, the other open question with open tracing is not open tracing, open telemetry cycle is the relation to metrics, as open telemetry also includes some metrics gathering, and likewise, we don't want to have two systems that are competing for metrics and metrics export. Or perhaps we want it, but then we need to basically draw the boundaries here, that open telemetry is only for the tracing part and metrics is for metrics or whatnot.
Yeah, I think we need to have a further conversation regarding the metrics aspect as well.
So how many active members do we have on the open tracing spec? I mean, do we need to have, I think, more discussion, more active discussion on open telemetry, the timing, as well as the metrics angle as well?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes.
Definitely.
I'm looking at the list of people here. Let's see. I thought I saw Don on earlier. Yeah, Don. Don Bourne. You and Pavel, are there other people that could be getting together to figure out a plan?
Yeah, I mean, Felix from my group too has been involved in the open tracing, and he is still involved. So I think that's, at least from the IBM side, I would think Felix would be the rep.
Is there anyone that's involved with metrics? Anyone taking a look at the open telemetry upstream spec and kind of did a impact analysis?
Yeah, we've taken a look at the metrics. I mean, I think metrics is a busy space, right? There's there's micrometer metrics, MicroProfile metrics, and open census metrics, right? So it's sort of an area where there's a lot of choice, I guess, for developers. So we did take a look at the open census one, and I think the challenge to just drawing a boundary line around open telemetry and saying that it's just for tracing is that the API, lets you easily access objects from sort of a central point for either tracing or metrics. They're kind of a bit interwoven from that perspective. So that's not to say that you can't use one without the other, but it might seem a little unnatural for somebody who is used to the open census API to come to MicroProfile and be told that they're not supposed to use the metrics side of it. So I think we may need a better answer than just, that's not part of the spec we only include half of open census.
So I think what I'm hearing is we're not, I don't know if we're fully prepared to, how do I say this? At least fully consume open telemetry, right? Maybe on the tracing side. That leads me to believe that defining, keeping open tracing in makes a little bit more sense. But I know that provides, that impacts other things, right? We're still going to have to maintain it. Any CVEs in the TCK are going to have to be dealt with, et cetera, right? Even if we don't update open tracing. My recommendation is we continue this discussion in the forums, and it's got to be a healthy discussion. I'd like for it to be a holistic discussion that does at least discuss the metrics aspect of it as well. And then, and I hate to say this, but in 2 weeks, come back and maybe finish off this conversation.
That's even better. Why will you hate it? That's the way to go.
Well, because we've been talking about this for a month now, right?
We have not been disciplined about it. Yep. We are being disciplined right now, putting a deadline and a way to go. So this is different than a few months ago.
Where are they at in this whole process of open telemetry? I mean, it sounds like they're just sort of pointing at the stands and they're really, really early and nothing's actually been produced. There's just a bunch of initiatives or what is the actual, do you know?
Pavel said they're having their first beta release in the next week or two.
Oh. So that's pretty far along.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, for this meeting, are we still doing a second half for the worker group?
Yes, we are. And so let's do this. So that's a good point, Emily. I was watching the clock, and I think the next 2 points we'll just talk to very briefly. And all three of these kind of discussions are going to have to get moved to the Google group. So let's continue this discussion there. There's already a thread on open telemetry and open tracing. So let's continue that and come back to this. I'd like it to be maybe a little bit more of a holistic look just to understand the metrics impact. The next bullet was mine. It's another reminder to give release 3 feedback on the 3.3 release, just around process and what we can do better. I've put a couple in there. Others have put comments in there. So please take a look at that, and we'll try to improve the process for MicroProfile 4. So that's all I'll say about that one. The last one, yeah.
Sorry about this. Do we have the thread already on this to initiate broader feedback on it?
Do we have a Google group thread? I think I might have mentioned it in the Google group thread.
I didn't see it, but I have been on vacation and catching up. So
yeah, I'll look. If not, I'll create one.
Thank you.
Okay. And the last one, Andy, this one can probably be pretty quick. I know you've already started the conversation in the Google group, but go ahead.
Yeah, and we can definitely continue it on the Google group. The main thing is, so we've released GraphQL 1.0, and now we're working on a client API for that. And so some of the, I guess basically we're looking for best practices or advice for how we should separate the client API from the server API. And we've looked at a couple of different things, and we just kind of wanted to run them by everybody. So we could just keep the APIs all together with the server APIs. We're not leaning that direction, but that's an option. Another option would be we keep it in the same GitHub repo, but we have a separate Maven artifact for it, which would probably require a separate TCK. One advantage of that is that then we have just a single spec for both the client and the server. So we have one document, but we have, it allows implementers to just say, hey, we just want to implement the client or just the server, and then run that TCK. And then I guess the other option would be to just spin off a whole new GitHub repo and have a separate GraphQL client project. And so part of that will impact, whether we add another box or not to the overall platform spec. So those are just kind of the things we're looking for as far as guidance for what we should do with the client APIs. And like John said, we have a topic on the Google Groups forum, but so far John's the only one that's replied. So we'd like to see some more feedback.
Yeah. I have a question. We haven't had the architectural calls, and this is exactly part of that conversation. We have growing pains. If we're going to create something new in a new repo, that's a no. Let's just drop it if it's not necessary. So the two options, my philosophy is, it's a maintainable. Will it be crowded? And what is your recommendation? Because you have given us 3 options, but my bias is, what do you think is best? And then we can go into the forum and you can say, hey, my recommendation is this, but this is why, and these are the costs, and just educate us, because not everyone will read or hear this call, and you need to help us understand it because you are speaking right now.
Sure.
Okay, and I'm gonna hit timeout here because again I'm doing clock management. Let's have this conversation in the Google group. So sorry about that. And part of the reason is I think I'm going to give just a couple of minutes around marketing. Is there anything that anyone from marketing wants to sum up? Maybe cap it to like 2 minutes, and I apologize for that.
Yeah, just a quick notice. Yesterday, sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So the marketing meeting yesterday, Hangout, only one person showed up. I think everyone else was either traveling or just busy. So it didn't really happen. So there's no news from my end. I don't know if you have anything, Amelia.
I updated at least the marketing list there of the things that were done in the last week since the last call. So the couple other things were done too, but around conferences, but obviously those were canceled. So they were kind of just removed. But nothing really needs to be discussed other than the architectural call, if it's happening or not, so we can set up the reminders.
My only thing is, during DevNexus, Neil, who is participant of the Jakarta EE committee and the marketing side, we chatted and we continue to chat, and he has joined us today, and he will start collaborating on the project, on the branding side. Neil, you're here. Do you want to take 30 seconds to say hello?
Scrambling for the mute button.
It's his first call. Give him a break. We can continue with the working group, but he is here, and hopefully we see him more often in the forum, and you will see him in the Gits and all these things. So it's just really cool. He's already helping with the Twitter media push.
All right, and apologize again. I'm in clock management mode here. So so welcome. And I am going to skip over the miscellaneous section. I apologize. And work down to the working group. If we have time at the end available, then we can continue this off, continue the miscellaneous discussion. Okay, so I did, at the beginning of this call, lock down the voting thread. So the voting thread is out there. I'll bring up the summary spreadsheet that I've been tracking pretty religiously throughout the week. So what we have in the push versus pull, I'm going to assume people are familiar with it. So I'm not going to go back and reread the text. We kind of did that during the last call. What we needed was a quorum of 29, and we did have 43 binding votes, and we needed a supermajority of votes would have been 29. I think I have that right. Yeah, 2/3. And we have basically 1 push, 5 abstains, and 37 polls. And the non-binding votes, we have 0 push, 0 abstain, 8 polls. So that means the technical, I guess, approach forward in terms of how we create specs will basically continue as, let's see here, as we kind of are already working. So I have an AI to myself to document this in the wiki. So are there any comments?
Congratulations
on this?
Yeah, why did it take so long to get to what seems to be an obvious answer?
I think that's a good question. And I don't know what the answer is. Because I was expecting more pushes just based on conversations that we've had. But when the rubber hit the road, for lack of a better phrase, right? Maybe it's just an overused phrase. When people had to vote, they voted pull. Now I think there was a couple of comments. Sorry, I was just gonna say there's a couple of comments. That around the push verbiage. So if I have to bring it up here. Sorry, I was actually in the spreadsheet. I could just pull it up here. Discussion thread. Thinking there wasn't enough differentiation between the two. For example, Steve and Alistair made comments, I think, basically, I'm going to heavily paraphrase, thinking there wasn't enough differentiation between the two. So, but the text has been out there, for a while for people to communicate on, and that's the text that we kind of settled on. So
there is kind of a negative aspect of the social part of this voting, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're about to vote and you pull up your email and you see, look, there's a dozen people and they all voted pull before me. Do I want to step in front of that train? Or do I just want to give in and go with the majority and say pull
Bill,
as well?
I disagree. Bill, I disagree. This community is not about following suit and doing what others do. We, each one of us, if there is anyone here who felt pressure to follow suit, please say so or write on that thread and say, I felt pressure. Because you cannot generalize. That is an insult to everyone who has voted.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily go that far. I think it was just. I think it's valid. It's valid. Feedback. It's a perspective. I think what I will say is, from Oracle's perspective, Oracle was a push, and Oracle did decide to vote with about 3 or 4 hours left in the voting window. Right, so would it have been different if Oracle had voted push earlier in the window? would it have changed people's minds? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, we're just incompetent. You already knew that, but
Mhm.
there were a bunch of people that seemed
Yeah.
to be arguing
I understand.
more on the poll side during the conversation. It'd be interesting to know why, when it came down to the end, they decided the thing that they seemed to be supportive of was not the thing they voted for.
Well, I'm also going to state, sorry, Bill, on one thing. When you mentioned it's a big company, and yeah, you know, obviously, you know, I understand how Oracle works, but what's interesting is that wasn't an Oracle vote necessarily, right? It was an individual vote as an individual committer. And so if you look at, you know, the voters within even single companies, you know, IBM had polls and abstains, right? And I think, I don't know if Red Hat did. I think Red Hat might have been unanimously poll. But, you know, and that's the interesting thing, is that this is not, it's not really like it was with the JCP, right? Where it was, you know, organizations voted. Here it's committers on the project. No, I understand where you're coming from as well, right? With Oracle having, I think, one committer at this point in time, and hopefully there's more, that was more of a company oriented vote perhaps, but I think really it's a community member vote. I mean, that's how we view it within MicroProfile.
Mm-hmm. This is like a little bit of the Apache way.
Right. So
we use Apache way for the vote.
I think it's I like a couple of people like when I encourage people to vote. Some people are saying looks like it's just a one way. Majority people already voted poll, and then they feel like okay, it's probably it doesn't matter to vote anymore. What I'm thinking, I mean, what will people think will be more genuine and etc. to vote, but it's not visible in the public?
No,
it's like
Emily, I understand you're talking about private voting where no one knows what. That is irresponsible, socially speaking, and open source.
Well, let me kind of state why we did it the way we did. Well, I think we did it the way we did as an open vote. Basically, the reason we did it the way we did is because that's how committers vote, right? We couldn't use the committer infrastructure because -1 means veto, right? But we didn't really use, there's no infrastructure to really that exists. But the reason we made it public is because all the committer votes are public. And so I can, before I vote, I can go look at a committer and see what everyone else voted before I vote. So that's kind of the reason that we did it the way we did, I think. Now, I think it's worth a discussion, at least. I don't want to necessarily shut down Bill's point. You know, it's saying, you know, can it influence votes? Well, maybe, but I'll just say it's worth it, you know, it's a discussion to have.
Yeah, I mean, on the Apache side, we've been voting in the open for 20 years, and it's not been a problem. Where we don't vote in the open is for committers. That's kind of the opposite of what happens here.
Interesting.
So on that side of the fence, you know, if someone gets put up for a vote as a committer and the whole world is watching, it's like they're going to feel really bad if someone votes -1 against them. It's in no way positive. So that's the one exception where people get voted on a private list, but still everybody sees everybody's vote who's on the private list. So the PMC, you know, is the thing that does the voting. But you know, I understand that. I don't see a problem with voting in open, because I think it's really difficult to create an open community if you don't vote in open. It's like you have this discussion out in the open, and then the discussion goes private, and then an answer comes from private. Just feels a little bit strange.
Well, I don't have any problem with making the votes apparent after the voting is concluded. It's just during the voting process, you're applying social pressure by the preponderance of votes in one direction.
Well, there shouldn't be social pressure. I mean, like, that's what we had a
Shouldn't
lot of
be
discussion
isn't are
in
completely different things.
I understand, but that's why we have a lot of discussion in advance to try to make sure everyone's voices are heard. But ultimately, if people don't feel, people need to be able to feel, people should feel confident about having an opinion and expressing it.
Yes.
Right, but if you go back and look at the discussion, there were clearly people who were at least pretending to argue the push side, if not actually supporting it, or people were at least in favor of aspects of the push side. And none of that seems to have come through here, which, you know, maybe they weren't really that committed to it to begin with. Maybe they had, you know, thought harder about it and changed their mind. I don't know. But it's curious that not even a single one of them
Bill, but have you
arguing for the push side during the discussion ended up voting for it?
Yeah.
Yes. I've been on many of the meetings. I've read a bunch of the email.
Yeah, maybe I can comment on that because I was one of those push defenders, and I voted as abstain for two reasons. One is indeed the difference between pull and push is now so narrow that it's almost identical, and you can go with either text in all directions. And the other thing was indeed there is that social pressure. If 90% of the committers says already pull, what's then the purpose of doing a push? And that are the two reasons why I put my abstain vote.
Well, Rudy, I would say the first reason is valid. If you don't think there's much of a difference and you don't see one way or the other, then vote abstain, or zero, or don't care. But don't vote against your own desire out of social pressure, right? I mean, there's nothing anybody can do to take the pressure off of you. I'm not going to stop having an opinion. Bill isn't going to stop having an opinion. Other people are not going to stop having an opinion. So you should continue to have an opinion and feel okay about it.
If anything, in the past when I voted against the grain, if anything, I mean, it was a way for me to record what my vote was, if anything.
Yes.
So that people knew. I was thinking that a good compromise could be that for the next time around, that when you vote, you can only see everybody else's votes once you click on vote, and then the display of all the votes is shown to you. I wonder if that'd be a good middle of the ground. That way you don't.
I think that could be a good middle of the ground.
Yeah, again, I was not ever suggesting that the final votes should be hidden from anybody. And what you suggest would have, that's basically the same effect. The point is, at the moment you're committing your vote, do you get to see how any other people voted or not? That's all that really matters here.
Yeah, after you vote, you will only see it. Yeah.
Right, after you vote, that's okay, because you can't change your vote, and so the other vote did not pressure you one way or another on your vote, because they weren't apparent to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like a Twitter vote, right? Before you vote, you are not allowed to see the status.
So can we because I really enjoy this conversation, and we're like frank as we continue to be, can we, if we're thinking about adjusting something, because that is what happens once we do, can we send a message to the forum and say, these are the results. During today's call, we got this feedback. Don't mention names, there is a video. And then we can say, what do you think? A poll. Just a freaking poll saying, should we keep the votes private while they are still ongoing? And or some suggestions. Because I'm not comfortable adjusting what I think was great, because I don't see anyone pushing someone else to do so. But now we have a few people here who considers that a problem. So we need to tackle it. But can we use the forum and take 2 weeks to until the next goal to figure out what we will adjust? Because that is what happens. We always adjust, and we are detached to what currently is. Should it be not efficient? Yeah, I'm not okay with changing what it is today, just in this call, and then moving forward.
Yeah, so here's my opinion, since I raised this subject to begin with. My opinion is, before the next vote of this sort, you should have this discussion and come to a conclusion.
That
Not
is
now,
too late.
before
That
the
is
next
too late.
vote.
We usually,
Hold on.
How can it be too late if it's before the next vote? The only way it's too late is if it's after the next vote. But if there's some time before the next vote when you have this discussion and come to a conclusion about how you're voting, that's fine. I don't think you need to do anything to change this vote.
no, we're not talking about changing the vote. I'm talking about the process. I always believe that if we decide to do everything at once we need a vote, it's too crowded. We should simplify it. And my recommendation, Bill, is that we should tackle it now while the vote just happened, say what lessons learned, like retrospective, see the community feedback, and then move on. Super simple. I don't believe that we should wait until the next vote to decide what to do, because that is bias. It could include such a bias. And for people like me, I would prefer to keep it as it is, but I will listen because that is what we do.
But
apparently, I'm not going to get my whole statement out before getting interrupted again.
Sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
I'm trying to get past this subject so that you would have the opportunity to discuss any other topics you wanted related to the vote, because I don't think this topic needs to be discussed in the next 10 minutes you have in this meeting. But apparently, that's not the way you feel. So please go right ahead.
No, Bill, this is still a valid discussion. Keep going.
I'm done. That's why I wanted to move on.
Okay.
It seems that other people are not done talking about this, so please continue talking about this.
Okay. Well, I regardless of what thing we choose, I guess it's really important to me that people feel comfortable to have their opinion, right? So, if we go doing things to try to make the votes more fair, ultimately isn't going, I don't know that I support these efforts, but I don't know that it increases people's comfort having an opinion in front of each other on discussions, right? So, I would say that I have seen a lot of situations. The way we did this vote, I actually preferred it considerably greater over the Apache system. The Apache system would be a +1, -1, or -1. And that system basically means whoever formulates the vote thread gets to decide if people look positive or negative. And it's a pretty terrible, basically, if you want something to happen, you would phrase your vote in such the way that you get to vote +1 and everyone else has to vote -1, and they look negative. So one opinion is considered positive and one opinion is considered negative, and it's the vote formulator who social manipulates that one. But this one, we just had 2 words, pull or push, and you just picked a word, and neither word had a positive nor negative connotation.
Well, interestingly, and I apologize to kind of back that up. I was very kind of not concerned. I understood that potential thing, which is why I actually put, even though I was in favor of pull, I put push first, because it's normally push versus pull, and just the normal vernacular and how we speak. So I actually, partially for that reason, is I made sure push was first. So anyway.
You tried.
Yeah, all I
tried.
would say is that for the people who voted abstain, we got to do better, and that includes don't vote abstain if you actually have an opinion. If we can make that a community credence, please vote your actual opinion so we can make it more socially acceptable to disagree. Doesn't mean that you're going to get the outcome you want. You may not be the majority. It's just, it's okay to have a differing opinion.
Maybe you need to allow another choice that says either one is fine with me.
Right.
So that abstain doesn't turn it into, or abstain is left with, well, I couldn't figure it out. I just don't know what to vote. I can't figure it out.
Right.
That actually is a really good idea.
Yeah, I used abstain because it's just common vernacular, right, around voting. But
to me,
yeah.
neutral.
But I agree.
Neutral doesn't work. Like
whatevs. That'll be the third option.
Either one is good for me.
That's kind of cool. I like that.
Figure it out. Yep.
So, okay, so let's, someone want to create a discussion thread on how to handle future votes in the Google group?
I can do it. I can
I
volunteer
thought you
myself.
did a good job already. I think Bill's suggestion of basic, maybe removing abstain, I think is a good thing, because if that becomes by the way, Rudy, it's not any more positive or negative to vote abstain versus pull or push. In fact, I would say voting abstain is worse because it says, I have an opinion, but I don't feel comfortable. And outwardly saying I don't feel comfortable is probably more awkward than just simply saying what you wanted.
I mean,
yeah, but sorry, John. Just want to mention the same comment as Bill said. We had already these discussions for 3 months, I guess. From day one, I knew what the outcome was.
I didn't, but
I did. I even mentioned it on the log in an internal chat system within Payara that would be the outcome. So whatever those discussions led, okay, it was maybe a good discussion, maybe it could turn people around, but I didn't believe in it. So at the end, I just went for the obvious thing that I do not want to see that there is not a unanimity in the community. Afterwards, there were, of course, some other votes, which then wasn't, so that it was no longer 100% poll, but that's everyone's choice, of course.
Yeah. I would have expected a lot more push votes, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. I was not as convinced. Going into this, I mean, day zero, before anybody voted, I was not convinced that was going to be the outcome.
Me neither. And we put on vacation. Kevin, what did you say?
Yeah, I said I was not either. It was a toss-up from my perspective before the vote started.
I was surprised to get Emily's pull vote. I thought she was going to vote push. I thought Rudy was going to vote push. I thought there was going to be a lot of push.
Oh, I think I vote a pull is because it's in the conversation. So I'm more like kind of concerned with the kind of long-term release, since it's kind of we haven't drilled down to the details about the pool model and etc. And so it's a long-term support can be fit in like a pool model. So that's why. So I haven't got peer pressure, by the way. I will vote whatever I think.
Thank you, Emily.
I was consistent with what I know of you.
Exactly.
And by the way, the long-term discussion is a good follow-on discussion, I think, to have. Is the idea of a long-term stable release something that we should consider in how we do specs, and then define what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So that changed my mind. So I think after this conclusion, definitely we need to look at the fine details about what a pool, kind of put in more details about pool. How can we make the like consumers' job a lot easier?
My question is, when is the
sorry, I'm going to add that to the list of things to do.
Yeah, I have a question about this. So we need to continue talking now. We move into the working group. So what are we going to focus on the next conversation? It should be 1 hour. Is it going to be 30 minutes? What are we going to do next? Because we need a reminder of what we were doing before this conversation for the last 3 weeks took place.
Well, so we do have, so to your point, in a week we have an hour-long meeting, right? And I personally think, I mean, just based on what we just briefly talked about, discussing the idea of an LTS is a valid, it seems to be the right next thing to discuss.
Is it? Because we just decided that we want to go for poll, so anything else, someone else who is interested in MicroProfile specs has to do it on their own. That's what we are voted for.
That's what I understood as well. But
so what is the point of an LTS then?
Rudy, you are awesome. Got it.
Well, it provides guidance.
Yeah. So LTS basically, even though we voted for pool, however, we do want to work with our consumers.
Well,
so we need to make some gesture, like we kind of declare some specifications, like versions and etc. is suitable for LTS. We know we are confident with that. However, like for the package name and etc., we carry on. We are not going to introduce any different packages and etc.
Is that really the most natural step, or is the most natural step that on the Jakarta EE side we have a discussion on how we're going to consume MicroProfile and leave the most flexibility to have that discussion before the MicroProfile goes, oh, and we're going to do it this way?
Okay, so how about this? It's at the top of the hour. Let's have the conversation in the Google group before the next meeting. If we don't find anything specific, to talk about before the next meeting, maybe we punt the next meeting. But what is the next step?
Yep. Let's do that. I've got a couple of items that I think we need to discuss. So let's start that thread and establish the agenda for next week's meeting.
And if we do this, can we drop the LTS as a potential topic and allow for those ones that were not on this call and won't listen to this video, bring ideas of what they want. Let's remind everyone the PRs are at work, what we have been talking for the last 3 months on the level of there are the PRs. This is what is open, and then just refresh. We should do a refresh at the moment. Restate what happens with the votes. This is my recommendation, and then just restart.
Well, the only reason I don't want to take LTS off the table is when we were discussing this in the various threads, it seemed to be a valid thing to discuss. And now maybe it'll be a short discussion. Maybe it'll be, let's first see if there's anybody that cares on the polling side, right?
I feel that there's a favoritism, John. Sorry to stop you, but I feel there's a favoritism. Why are we not doing this with also Jakarta? And what about the other projects? Are we okay to do this? Right. Is that responsible based on the vote?
All right. So
Amelia.
Okay, last comment is for Amelia. Sorry, for Emily, and then I'm going to stop the call.
Yeah. I just quick. I think it's good. At least we make some gesture from MicroProfile, and then we can talk over the fence in the Jakarta. What if we do this LTS? Is that acceptable? And then we will hear what the Jakarta EE community says.
All right, so let's continue this conversation in the Google groups. Thanks everyone for joining. We have another working group call in a week, same bat time, same bat channel. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Right.